All right, so we're going to continue our series in Philippians, and I have to ask you all a question. So, show of hands. Everyone, pay attention. This is serious. Show of hands. If you think unified joy sounds better than joyful unity, raise your hands. If you think unified joy, if that's what it should be called, unified joy, sounds better than joyful unity. Okay, hands down. Okay, if you think joyful unity sounds better than unified joy, raise your hands. Nate Kurtz, ha. Anyways, so we had lunch together, and this is what happened. He did Philippians chapter 3, and Nate did a great job a couple weeks ago. Let's give Nate a hand for that. He did a great job. Yeah, but when we were at Chick-fil-A, he said, hey, I think it should be called unified joy. And then I'm like, that sounds better than joyful unity. It sounds better than my lesson. I thought joyful unity sounded really cool. And then he said unified joy. And I got really self-conscious. And then I began questioning myself. And I said, I went to college. I have a degree. Like, I know how to put series together, right? I have cool sayings for my saying. I have cool sayings for my series. And Nate completely took a sledgehammer to that. So thank you for all of you and taking a sledgehammer to Nate's dreams. Because we judge people. Yes, Leg.
I was kind of confused with the question, but I totally would have voted for the other. If I
Landon, it's too late. You already didn't vote. It's too late. But anyways, moving on. That's my bad. Sorry. We're going to continue with joyful unity, Philippians. But anyways, so let's go to the next slide. This is Philippians chapter 1, verses 29 through 30. This is the end of chapter 1, and this is what Paul writes to the church in Philippi. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but to also suffer for him, since you are going through the same struggle you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. So what Paul writes to this church, he says, hey, not only has Jesus allowed you to believe in him, Jesus has allowed you to go through suffering for him. Just like I'm suffering, and you see what I'm going through, Jesus has allowed you to be a part of that. So it's how do you handle suffering well? And I want to be careful when I talk about that, because we can go on one extreme that Christianity is all suffering, that's all difficult times, and that's not true, right? Or we can go to the other extreme that, hey, being a Christian and following Jesus, right? That there's never any difficult times with it. That's always good times. It's always Chick-fil-A, and I always say cupcakes, but I really like Chick-fil-A. So I say Chick-fil-A instead of cupcakes, whatever makes you happy. But anyways, outside of that is somewhere in the middle. That being a Christian, there's fun and there's excitement and there's joy, but there's also difficult times as well. So as you being a follower of Christ, that you being a Christian, how do you handle the difficult times that comes in your lives? And this is, I think, really cool thing to talk about tonight, because for both cell groups, we asked you guys, both junior high and senior high, to say, hey, what do you want us to talk about? How are you doing spiritually? And both groups, you guys said, how do we handle difficult times? How does God really get us through difficult times in our lives? 2,000 years ago, you had this church going through difficult times. 2,000 years ago, you had Paul going through a difficult time, and Jesus saw the church in Philippi, and he saw Paul through a difficult time, and that same Jesus wants to help you get through the difficult times that you go through. So this whole thing is this: how does Jesus walk us through the difficult times that we go through? So let's go to the next slide. Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 through 13, because we talked about the end of the chapter, but we're going to go backwards now and say, how do we get to a place that we can handle difficulties well? This is what Paul writes here. Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. So when we read Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 through 13, and you read those verses, this is the point I want you to grab. Allow the gospel to touch every area of your life. Invite Jesus to be a part of every area of your life. Because you have Paul, and while he's in jail, he says this, hey, even though I'm in jail right now, guess what? God is using this to spread the gospel to people. That he says, like the whole palace guard, like all the Roman guards, they all know about the gospel. They all have heard about Jesus. That God has used my difficult time to work through me to accomplish some really good things. And how did Paul get there? He said, no matter what I'm doing in life, right, Jesus can be a part of it. Jesus is part of my good times. He's part of my difficult times. And I want to show you a slide now. This is Eric Liddell. And why is Eric Liddell important? He ran, okay, I'll show you another picture of him. He ran in the 1924 Olympics. And why should you care about that? So go back to the other slide. Eric's parents, they were missionaries. They were missionaries to China. So from like a young age, he knew about Jesus. He knew about the gospel, but he also knew this. Hey, I enjoy running, right? So when his parents were in China serving as missionaries, he decided to come back here in France, when the Olympics were taking place, he decided, hey, I'm going to do that. And he used his ability to run, and he tied it into his faith. And this is what he said. Slide. I believe God made me for a purpose, but he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. So Eric said this, I believe God created me for a purpose, that I just don't blindly exist in this world, but God made me for a purpose, and God also made me fast. So I enjoy running, so I'm going to take running and invite God to be a part of that. And then I love that end quote, and when I run, I feel his pleasure. I will never be able to say that. Like when I run or attempt to jog, I feel God's displeasure. I just feel like in heaven, oh, look at this, angels. This is pathetic. I don't want to see it anymore. Let's move on. But anyways, right? Eric said, I run, I feel God's pleasure. And somebody say, hey, running's not spiritual at all, but it is when you invite God to be a part of it. So what ends up happening here? We have our Christian life right here, and then we have our regular life right here, and the two never come together. So you see God working in youth group, you see God working in church, but then when you hit, when you hit your real life, real issues, you never see God working in that. But what we learn from Eric, what we learn from Paul is this, that the spiritual life, right, and our everyday life, that they're linked together, that God works in both of those areas. And here's a really cool story about Eric. So there was a race on Sunday, and he says, I love God, I love Jesus, I cannot run on Sundays. And that was his best competition, and he decided, I'm not going to do it. And so then he didn't run in that race, but then he ran in the 400s, and he ended up winning that. And when they said, well, how did you do that? You didn't train for that. How did you do this? He said, God gave me the strength because I wanted to honor him. He honored me. There were some people that would never go to church, some people that would never have a conversation about Jesus. But what did Eric use? He used his ability to run as a megaphone to point people to Christ. What about you? How has God wired you? Whatever passions you have, how can God take those good passions you have and accomplish something great with them? Because you might accomplish something good with your pleasures. You might accomplish something good with your abilities. But if you invited Jesus to be a part of that, he could accomplish something great. How do you get through difficult times? You invite God to be a part of all of your life. I'm going to show you another quote from Eric. He also said this: circumstances may appear to wreck our lives and God's plans, but God is not helpless among the ruins. God's love is still working. He comes in and takes the calamity and uses it victoriously, working out his wonderful plan of love. And why is that quote really important? It's going to be really important in a couple of minutes, but keep in mind, that's what Eric said. Next slide. This is Philippians chapter 1, verses 14 through 18. And in reality, we're just going to look at verse 14, and it says this: and because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. So out of all those verses, I just want you to focus on verse 14. It's the fact that that Paul says, hey, my other brothers and sisters, they have seen my chains, and they have become bold to preach the gospel of Christ. And this is point 2. Jesus will give you the courage you need to accomplish the plans he has for you. Jesus will give you the courage you need to accomplish the plans he has for you. Or and maybe another way to say that would be this: Jesus will make you brave to help make others brave. That when Paul was in prison, right, Paul decided to be brave. He decided to be bold for Christ. And what did that do? That other Christians, they saw Paul in prison. They saw him like in chains. And what did that do? They didn't see Paul be discouraged. They didn't see Paul nervous. They didn't see Paul scared. But they saw Paul say, hey, I'm still going to preach Christ. And what did that do for them? Hey, we're not in chains, right? If he's bold, why can't we be bold also for Jesus? And why does that go back to Eric Liddell? So after he was done with the Olympics, he went back to China as a missionary. And what ended up happening? There was conflict with the Chinese government, and like war was breaking out. So what did Eric do? He sent his family out of China, but he stayed behind. And after he stayed behind in China, like I said, conflict happened, and he ended up in a prisoner's camp. But while in the prisoner's camp, people were emboldened by his faith. That people looked to Eric as someone that could guide them. That people saw Eric's faith, and that's something that they wanted. And it wasn't like he wasn't like always perfect. He had a nervous breakdown. But even having a nervous breakdown, he never lost his faith. While in the prisoner camp, he had a brain tumor, and the brain tumor just really messed him up. And as he was dying, they told his wife, his last words were this: it's complete surrender. It's complete surrender to God. Eric Liddell's last words in a Chinese prison camp were, it's complete surrender to God. Guys, I'm not that brave. I wish I can tell you that it was complete surrender to God in every area of my life, but it's not. And I know you're the same way. That all of us, there's things we hold on to that we feel like, God, I have this, right? And then it always goes wrong. I don't know, it's so stupid in my life. Like, why do I try to be like the captain of my ship, and every time I'm the captain of my ship, it never turns out the way that I want it? But when I allow God to have control of my life, it's always for the best. And that's a lesson at 33 I'm still trying to figure out. So I don't expect you at 14 or 11 or 16 or 17 to get it all right. But my goal is this: can we all let go of the steering wheel a little bit more? Eric Liddell, in his life, he makes people brave. When I see what God did through his life, that encourages me to want to live more for Jesus. And not just him, that if you look at church history, there were Christians that they were dying for their faith. And I remember just reading one story about one guy, they were marching the Christians like to their deaths. And what Rome said is this: hey, if you simply tell us you're not a Christian, we will let you go. And this guy said, hey, he went through torture, and he says, look, I don't believe in Jesus, right? Whatever you say goes, and they let him go, right? And then they were marching these Christians like to their deaths, and these Christians were singing hymns, right? They were singing hymns to Jesus as they were being marched to their deaths. And we're told like this in some history reports that some of the Christians that denied Christ, when they heard the other Christians singing and marching to their deaths, that encouraged them. And the same people that denied Christ, they ran into the crowd and they began singing hymns too. And they also laid down their lives for Jesus. How did that happen? They saw the courage of others, and that courage in others encouraged them to be brave. Jesus will make you brave to encourage others. That maybe, like, you have no idea if one of you were to stand up for your faith, right, and say, hey, as I follow Christ, follow me, what would our youth group look like? Jesus made Paul brave, and that encouraged others. Countless Christians, men and women, right, they laid down their lives, and as they were laying down their lives, that made other people brave. Eric Liddell, right, someone that lived in 1924, I read his story tonight, and that gives me courage to be brave. Jesus will give you the ability to be brave when you need it the most. But for some of us, right, we live our lives in such a way that we never give Jesus the opportunity to work the way that he does. Christianity isn't boring. Okay, how many of you think your iPhone is boring? Right? It's not, but if you never turn it on, it's really boring. Faith is the same way. If you never turn it on, it's completely boring. But if you take the opportunities that Jesus gives you and you walk with them, that's when it becomes encouraging. Which brings me to my last point. Slide. Philippians 1:27. Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel. That Paul is saying, hey, whether I come and see you or whether I don't, I want to hear that you guys are doing life together. So the point would be this: go through life with those that Jesus gives you for the journey. When you're going through difficult times, go through difficult times with the people that Jesus gives you for the journey. Slide. Does everyone know who the basketball player is? LeBron James. Does everyone know who the other guy is? Arthur. Wait, time out. Whoa, pause. Have you guys watched the cartoon show? That's still on? I was in college and I would watch. Never mind. But hey, there's a point. Wait. Okay, don't judge me, JC. What do you watch? Never mind. Well, here's the point. So LeBron James also watched Arthur. How do I know? Slide. Because on his Twitter account, when he was mad at his teammates, he would use that fist, right? And it was like Arthur angry, shaking his fist, and he would use that when his team would lose. And it was basically like saying, look, I'm going to trade you if you don't start making your layups. But anyways, that has nothing to do with my lesson, but I was so far in, I had to use this. But I do have a point. Actually, one more slide. Okay, that someone took a meme of LeBron James and put him on Arthur's body. I thought that was hilarious. But my point is this: LeBron James uses his Twitter account to talk to his teammates, and on one tweet he put out was this: quit trying to fit out, but fit in. Quit trying to fit out, but fit in. And what he was telling one teammate is this: hey, look, we're all trying to do this as a team, but you're over here doing your own thing. Don't be that way. Like, quit trying to be your own person. Quit trying to fit out of the team, but fit in. It's the same thing with youth group. Guys, girls, like, don't try to fit out. Right? Don't try to be like so like out there. You're not part of the group, but be a part of us. So I'm going to show you one last thing, and then I'm going to be done. Because I could talk to you about fitting in and why that's really important, but I want you to hear from people that were here last year, people that were in your shoes last year, and hear what they have to say about it. What is one piece of advice you would give for those who will be in youth group next year?
One piece of advice that I would give is make sure from an early age you get involved in a discipleship group with a good group of Christian friends here from youth group, because that really helped me from a young age. We really bonded together and we could share stuff with each other, and that's really important because you can keep each other accountable and you can see each other at school, and even if you don't go to the same schools, you can still constantly be praying for each other. So I think finding an accountability group when you're younger, I think is one of the most important things you can do while you're here in youth group.
Just show up. Like last year, I kind of fell off the face of the earth here, and I probably should have just showed up.
I would say form good habits and start them now, because pretty soon, it doesn't seem like it, but pretty soon you're going to be, away from your parents, and you're going to have to get yourself up on Sunday and go to church, and you're going to have to, take time out of your own day and make sure you read your own Bible. And it's really important to make good habits, devotions, and going to church and everything right now.
I would say make sure you open yourself up to new friends. Speaking from past experiences, I was always in a little clique, and then that clique started to fall apart and no longer come. And so then I would be like, well, who am I supposed to hang out with? If you open yourself up to new friends, you'll never be lonely. You'll always have a friend here, and it is so important to have friends that are there to back you up, to help you grow, to keep you accountable. So as long as you have good, solid friends behind you, you'll never fail.
I would say root yourself in God's word. And then 2 sub-points I would have for that would be, I think a lot of my life I believed the lie that the Bible is about me. And even if I didn't think it in my head, I thought it in my heart and in the way I read it. It was like, what can I get out from this? It's not relevant to me. It doesn't say anything about me. But I forget that God's the central character in the Bible. And reading the Bible is about knowing him. And the more I know him, the more life changes, I guess. It's beautiful when you know God, so yeah.
I would say keep eternity in mind, always. Keep eternity in mind. This is all so temporary. Like, it goes so fast, and at the end of the day, we're not going to be here, we're not going to be in our small groups, it's going to be you and I alone in front of God. So keep eternity in mind. With every decision you make, every day, just keep eternity in mind.
All right, as they told you, be here, fit in, don't try to fit out. Understand eternity in mind, that we're going to be with God all together as just one big church family. So while you're here and you're going through difficult times, allow your friends here to help you out. So I'm going to close in prayer, and then we're going to put chairs up. So, dear Jesus, thank you for tonight. Thank you for how you help us and you guide us. And as we believe in you, as we trust you, that difficult times come in our lives, but you have placed like other believers in our lives that help us. You give us courage to go through those difficult times, and that if we are willing, if we invite you, you're willing to be a part of every area of our lives. And I hope we take those truths, we place them in our hearts, and we obey you better. We love you and give this prayer in your name. Amen. So you guys are dismissed. Put chairs up.